So welcome everyone to the third in our series of innovation to commercialization. We are so happy this week to have Phoebe Miles, not only as our presenter, but she's actually at Florida House and has a group in person with her as well. So a little bit different for us, but Phoebe, welcome. We're so glad to have you. For those of you who do not know, Florida is the only state to have an embassy in Washington, D.C. We connect, celebrate, and champion Florida to the world every day through programs, events, welcoming and hosting people when they come up from the state to visit Washington, D.C. Obviously, we love to have company. We always start by offering people a glass of fresh Florida orange juice, and in this case, Gatorade as well. So please come see us when you can. We are thrilled to be able to do this series again with our partners, the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention, as well as the Florida Inventors Hall of Fame. As I mentioned before, this is the third of the 5 presentations that we'll be doing this summer. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to Jamie Spurrier. She's the program manager from the Florida Inventors Hall of Fame. So Jamie, if you would say a few words of welcome.
Thanks so much, Liz, for that introduction. And I want to extend a welcome to everyone as well. We want to first thank our partners at the Florida House on Capitol Hill, as well as the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention for partnering with us again this year on the Florida Innovation Summer Speaker Series. And we're so excited to have Phoebe Cade Miles here today as well. She's just the perfect person to talk about the importance of invention education as a foundational building block to the innovation ecosystem. At the Florida Inventors Hall of Fame, our mission is to encourage individuals of all ages and backgrounds to strive toward the betterment of society through continuous groundbreaking innovation, where we support a culture of creativity, one that fuels innovation, drives economic growth, and encourages investment in Florida. We're also looking to create a culture shift here, to celebrate our state's inventors the way we would celebrate national heroes, and hopefully inspire others to make their own discoveries. The Florida Inventors Hall of Fame is a statewide initiative located at the University of South Tampa. To date, we have inducted 58 remarkable inventors who collectively hold over 4,000 patents. Some of our inductees include Thomas Edison, as well as Hollywood icon Hedy Lamarr, Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, and of course, Dr. James Robert Cade, the inventor of Gatorade, and Phoebe's father. We invite you to come visit us anytime online or in person. You can tour our museum, which is free to the public and located on the USF Tampa campus. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jennifer Dempsey, the marketing manager for the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention, where they are creating cutting-edge innovation programs.
Jamie, I'm excited to be here today speaking on behalf of the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention to kick off today's program. Thank you to Florida Inventors Hall of Fame and Florida House for being such incredible partners for us. The Cade Museum's mission is to transform communities, and we do that by inspiring and equipping future inventors, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. The museum is named for Mary Cade and her husband, Dr. James Robert Cade, who was a doctor, a musician, a poet, and the lead inventor of Gatorade. The museum is designed to promote the development of an inventive mindset, which we here at the Cade call inventivity. Through our proprietary invention education framework, we create outreach programs, exhibits, and museum experiences that spark wonder and teach STEAM concepts through the lens of invention. One of our marquee programs, the Cade Prize, awards inventors and entrepreneurs in Florida, Alabama, and Georgia that are addressing critical issues in the Southeast. This year, the Cade Prize will award $63,000 in seed capital prizes. We're accepting applications for the Cade Prize through the end of the month. And more information is available on our website, cademuseum.org. And now I'd like to welcome back James Di Virgilio as our moderator for today's program. He is one of the country's leading fiduciary investors and financial planners, as well as the co-founder of Chacon Diaz and Di Virgilio Wealth Management. James has been featured on the world's largest news networks, was a Gator 100 honoree, and a 40 Gators Under 40 award winner. James is also an adjunct professor at the University of Florida, the co-host of Gator Nation Football Podcast. He's the co-host of Radio Cade and on the board of directors for the Cade Museum. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. So I'll pass it over to James. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. And unfortunately today, my voice is going to be a bit spotty. So I'm going to do what I can to make sure that you can hear me. But if it goes in and out, it's not technical difficulties. It's just actually my own vocal cord difficulties. Our guest today is, of course, the illustrious Phoebe Miles. I've had a chance to know her now for several years. She is the co-founder of the Cade Museum for Creativity and Invention. And today we're going to talk a lot about innovation, and specifically with Phoebe, we're going to talk about the Invent Possible curriculum, as well as what the Cade and what Phoebe is doing, not only in Florida, but across the country to spur an innovative mindset. Since you've already had a great background on the Cade, I'm just going to jump right in with Phoebe. Phoebe, it's so great to have you on the program.
So good to see you, James. I always love our interviews.
Yes, likewise. And let's hop right in and let's just talk right about something specific. What is the Invent Possible curriculum?
So an Invent Possible curriculum is our proprietary framework. It's really more a framework for approaching curriculum that is designed to create an inventive mindset. So rather than teaching subjects in certain buckets like chemistry, physics, biology, we don't organize it that way. We teach science through the lens of invention, but inventions themselves are multidisciplinary. An invention never comes out of one area of science. So what we do is we reverse engineer the concept of inventions, and each invention is assigned a profile of concepts that go into the invention. So that's just a little bit of I'll have to go backwards now and say that if you can picture a Greek temple, that has steps going up, then it has pillars, and then it has the frieze in the upper part of the temple. So we designed it in 32 building blocks of invention that can describe any invention in the world. So if you think about our English language has 26 letters in the alphabet. And with 26 letters, you can make any word. You can make Shakespeare, you can make novels, you can do whatever with just 26 words. We had the insight with just 32 building blocks of invention, you could scramble them in any way and make any invention known to man. So they're housed in 7 different pillars of science. So the 7 pillars of science are arranged in a different way. So we have waves. One example is any invention having to do with waves. That's not the usual way you would teach science, but we think waves have certain properties. So any invention whose core technology is about waves would be housed right there. So in the pillar of science that is waves, we have acoustics, any invention that has to do with hearing or sound. We have optics, any invention that has to do with sight or lenses, and we have diagnostics, any wave invention that has to do with diagnosing and treating. So each of those are assigned to dozens and dozens of hands-on experiments that highlight the science that goes into it. So it's all designed for a way for kids to see unusual connections. Like, to me, the leading definition of creativity is seeing the thread that unites. So most inventors, they see things, random connections that other people don't see. For instance, the invention of Gatorade is a random connection of a nephrologist and a football coach. 2 very different subject matters, but yet they were both dealing with stressed out kidneys that were not producing urine, right? That was the insight that my dad had in talking to the football coach. If you have an inventive mindset, you see right away the connection. Healthy football players in the prime of their life, sick kidney patients, and you can come up with a solution. So it's the whole Invent Possible framework is really designed to help students see connections and develop an inventive mindset while at the same time learning scientific principles.
So let's imagine that the Invent Possible curriculum is not around, is not possible, so to speak. Are we to assume that some of these students that would have potentially been exposed to this through a curriculum would perhaps not think in an innovative way? Maybe they wouldn't be as innovative as they might be. Is this something you're born with essentially, or can we really teach people to view things with this innovative mindset?
I think you can absolutely teach people to think more creatively. And I believe that every human being, if you have a brain, you have the ability to create and be creative. There's no question. So the old thinking in the several decades ago was that either your right brain or your left brain. And if you're right brain, you can be creative and you're born with it. And if you're left brain, you're not. That has been completely debunked by modern science. Any creative solution activates the entire brain or networks across the brain. It's not, creative solutions don't come out of the right brain. You have to have the left connected with the right to have a creative solution. So I believe you can teach creativity, just starting with that. You have the potential to be creative, even and especially if you're a bad student. We love to work with kids who don't identify themselves as being strong students, because sometimes they see connections that others don't, and you can reward that. It can be that aha moment.
So why is creating an innovative culture such an important thing to you? Obviously, you co-founded a museum, you grew up the daughter of an inventor, but what is it about this culture that continues to have you pour a lot of your time and efforts into it?
So that's a great question. And I would have to say, it's not just building an innovative culture right now. It's rediscovering our roots as a nation of this common culture of innovation that we all share. I like to point out that we have a very strong culture of innovation in this country. And it's something that unites Americans across all political, racial, social, and economic classes. It's something we take for granted because it's so much a part of our everyday life. So I like to compare it to a fish that's swimming in the ocean, right? A fish doesn't even know it's in water because the water's always been there. So I think of it more as a pathway forward in a divided nation that can't seem to agree on anything. We can agree on this. And that's the beauty of the innovation culture, is that it requires insight and perspectives from many different perspectives. Solutions come from many different backgrounds coming together with that aha moment. And it's a very exciting part of the American experience. People ask, how did I come up with that? It was over time, because my husband and I lived overseas for 20 years of his career. We lived in many different countries. We loved every single one we lived in. I adored my life as a Foreign Service wife and the experiences that we had overseas. But I noticed every time we came back to the United States, there was a different energy level in that culture of innovation. So people would start, when I hear them say Americans don't have a common culture, I think, no, that's really not right. We do. And I noticed it more strongly each time I came home from living overseas. So we have all people can be creative across the world. There's not like Americans are more creative, but Americans have a system of entrepreneurship that's embedded into our Constitution. And that's the difference between the United States and the other countries that we used to live in.
Now, Phoebe, I have to know, you're sitting in DC right now, where you live, in the Florida house. Behind you, we have a beautiful beach scene. We have some mini orange groves there. Obviously, Gatorade, co-founded, by your father in Gainesville. Why choose Florida as a state where you're sort of creating national initiatives for innovation? Why not choose DC? Why not choose California? Why the state of Florida?
Florida has this incredible innovation ecosystem that's just bubbling up to the top right now. And a lot of people, when they think of Florida, they think of beaches, oranges, Disney World, tourism. And they don't usually put innovation in the same bucket of Florida, but it is my intention to change that conversation and actually highlight all of the innovation that's going on in Florida. But to your point, I think Florida, starting as an agricultural and tourism state, reflects what a lot of countries across the world have as their primary economy. They have not yet developed an innovation economy. My supposition is if Florida has developed into one of the top states for innovation, and we figured out this ecosystem, we can then help identify and encourage other areas to develop that as well. And how does that happen? So it's a fascinating story of the Florida innovation system and how it developed. If that's where you want to go with the conversation.
I do want to go. That's gonna set me up for how you're going to use Invent Possible and the Cade Prize to begin to realize this mission.
Right. It's all connected. You remember, inventors always say everything's connected. So I have a problem because I see everything is connected at the museum, but sometimes people from the outside can say, well, this is different. Why are you doing? It's like, it's all connected. But if I could go back to the Constitution for just a minute, Florida just built upon what was already established as a national culture of innovation. We just were later to the game because we weren't really, our population was so small. Even when we became a state, I think it was 80,000 people, very, very small. Now we're the top third population. I mean, it's a very different state that we're talking about right now. But this common culture of innovation is what I wanted to talk about, like the common culture of innovation that ties us together as a nation. Goes back to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And it's called the Inventors Clause. To promote the progress of useful arts to inventors, the exclusive right to their discoveries for a limited time. This was extraordinary and unparalleled in world history. To have a constitutional document give the right to an inventor to their ideas for a limited part of time highlights the very best of American culture of individual, but community at the same time. An individual has the right to their idea to profit from it and create a company or license it to other people, but only for 17 years or a limited time. And then it's open to the public for the betterment of all. And this was really the founding fathers' secret weapon to making sure our country succeeded as a country. Will we succeed as a country when we have no industry and we're completely dependent on Europe? The answer is yes, because we're going to do a patent system and it's going to be one of the first laws we sign into law. So the patent system was signed into law, the third law, 1790, 2 years before the post office. Because everybody at the Constitutional Convention, they all agreed that this was going to be our strategy. There was no disagreement. It's one of the few things that people didn't disagree about. So the Bill of Rights came later, right? The Bill of Rights, we disagreed about a lot of things and we still disagree about a lot of things, but not that. So the only time the word right is used in the main body of the Constitution is the right to invent. That's awesome. I get so excited every time I talk about it. And my husband says, you are the only person I know that any conversation in the world ends up Article 1, Section 8, Inventors Clause. And it's like, you got it. It does, because I love it.
Now, for context, at that time, and even today, how novel was that? How many other countries were utilizing an inventor clause or something like it?
So Britain had a patent system, but it was more like a monopoly for wealthy people. You would buy a monopoly and you could monopolize a certain industry. It was not a democratization of patents that we have. And you had to be wealthy and you had to be educated. In America, it was whoever. And it was the most democratic of all institutions. So before women could have the right to vote, they had the right to invent, and they did. Some of the earliest patents were from, I believe she was in Connecticut, created a fabrication method for straw hats, because before the revolution, you would import your hats from France or England, and we had no hat industry. So she invented a process for making straw hats. Unfortunately, her model and her patent burned down in the patent office when there was a big fire. So we don't have the actual, but we do know there are engravings of that. Other women invented all sorts of different systems to solve problems that they had on the frontier. So Sarah Sewell, we have at our museum, she invented a teeter-totter washing machine because she wanted her kids to be able to play on the, there were no playgrounds, but why don't you play and I'm going to do this washing machine. She sent a patent model to the Washington, D.C., free of charge. Post office paid for delivery. Right, no, it's incredible, right? It's really incredible. Then we'll get to Florida in just a second. The patent office is now the National Portrait Gallery in Washington. Anybody can see it, you see portraits. But it had the patent model hall, which was the main tourist attraction in the 1840s and 50s. It preceded the Smithsonian by 10 years. And it was on every tourist must-see visit. So Americans would stroll the patent hall office and see what had come in from the frontier, from people, from women, from Blacks, from everybody, not just white men. When people talk about our founding fathers, it was democratic across the spectrum, educated, uneducated. People would celebrate what they saw in the patent model hall. So imagine that unleashing of creativity from ordinary Americans was extraordinary. And it could almost make me cry.
And so essentially what you're saying is America had its own Invent Possible program.
Yes.
The world did not have a boilerplate for what they created. They created something new. It led to flourishing across the country. And now here we are in an age where we're saying, hey, there's a chance for us to increase that mindset amongst our children and our communities.
Yes, it's a chance to connect them to the very best of American culture while acknowledging and giving opportunities to the flaws in American culture that prevented, especially in the South, enslaved populations from being a part of that. In the South, they were not allowed to patent inventions because it was property, and they were not allowed to hold property. In the North, that was a different thing. So I think the Invent Possible curriculum is a way of providing access to this vibrant and beautiful American culture that we have in common to everybody, and have them be a part of it from birth to the end of your life. So our framework actually pulls together the whole community. Just by its very nature, it activates a community.
Yeah, and data would back that up. Immigrants today account for 16% of new innovations, almost a quarter of the economy of all innovations. And most of them are first generation Americans with what you would consider to be a lower education level. They certainly don't often have resources. And that's significantly to your point. And that is the beauty of creativity and creation. So let's start then connecting all of these dots. You have Invent Possible. We're going to educate the youth. That model starts in Florida, could start to go around the country. And then you have the Cade Prize, which is something that's going to be later on down the road, right? Tell us a little bit about the Cade Prize and how that fits in to, really, again, furthering this innovative mindset.
So Cade Prize is actually the first program that we initiated with the Cade Museum back in 2010, well before we had our building that was built. And that was a very deliberate thing. It was something we could do without a building, without a program, but we could reward inventors for taking that first step of commercialization. And our thought was Gatorade was invented in a laboratory at a university, but it became a product and it became a company, and it moved out of the laboratory into the marketplace. So we wanted to replicate that and just get people excited again about this idea of inventions and inventors, because I had known that Gainesville was chock-a-block full of inventors. but it wasn't part of our lexicon. No one spoke of Innovation Gainesville at that point. But I had, because of the Gatorade settlement years ago, 20% of Gatorade royalties have to go into research, medical research, and it also helped form their innovation hub, which was where you could license technologies from universities. Because of that relation, I happened to know which companies were forming in Gainesville, and that they were based on university technologies that were extraordinary. And some of them, in some cases, funded by Gatorade research royalty money. So it's like, how do we applaud this and have our inventors be like our champions, not just Gator football, but like our inventors? Can we celebrate them in the same way? So we did the first prize, 2010, and gosh, 4 days before it closed, we had maybe 4 applications. We thought this has been a total disaster. The next day, the day before closing, we got 50. And then the last day we got another 50. So we had like 104 applications that came in at the very last minute. And it was covered in the paper. We invited journalists. It was a sellout crowd. Like, we could not believe that we sold out. People were so excited about this treasure we had in our community, and we didn't even know it. So that's the origin of Cade Prize. And the following question was how that ties into Invent Possible.
Well, how we're going to take, Invent Possible and Cade Prize, and then how this helps to realize your vision of creating a more innovative country.
Right. So one thing we make Cade Prize applicants sign is that they would agree to help teach a class in front of kids if they're a finalist and if we ask them. Of course, we don't ask every inventor. Some of them are not appropriate for what we're doing in the age level, but all of them have to sign yes, or they can't participate in the prize. And it's a $50,000, $60,000 cash purse now. So we have a ready-made pipeline of inventors to put in front of kids. It's really actually been incredible. Pre-COVID, we had an inventor every weekend, and sometimes coming in to teach classes and camps. I like to tell people my whole inventive mindset was framed by having an inventor as a father. I had a seat at the table with an inventor every day, and it was exciting. It was optimistic. It was hopeful. It shaped my worldview. So how do we give every child that opportunity to connect with an inventor? Well, so you have to have a prize that flushes out the inventors, and then you invite them to be in front of the kids. That's how we did it.
Well, I think it's safe to say now, for anyone that watched this and doubted that everything was connected, they now know for sure that everything is indeed connected in your mind with how all of these things tie together. We have reached the Q&A portion of today's program. So if you want to ask Phoebe a question, go ahead and put that in the chat, and I will read that out for you. Phoebe, in the meantime, give me one of your best tips. So during the Invent Possible curriculum, you have all of these facts in your head. For anyone in the audience of any age, what's maybe one of the best sort of tips to say, hey, here's a way that you can have an innovative mindset?
Well, innovation usually happens not in a solitary mind. People like to think about the inventor being the inventor in his laboratory, and there is some truth to that, but think of all of the different influences that have come into that creative mind. So it's like you can be a part of that. And my biggest tip, my mother never thought of herself as being inventive, but she saved the Gatorade experiment from disaster by adding lemon. No one would drink it. It tasted awful. The players wouldn't drink it. And my mom was like, Bob, add lemon. So that is an example of a team and different viewpoints coming together. So whoever you are and wherever you are on whatever career, whatever personality type, is not so material as understanding that inventivity happens with a very diverse population of people with different skill sets, different viewpoints. So inventivity is both singular and community. So the framework, again, would be individually, kids are connected to these experiences, but it pulls in the community because each building block and each pillar has community partners that come in and help teach. So you don't have to have conversations of who's conservative or progressive, Republican and Democrat. I don't care. What we have the conversation is, this is a problem in the community that we can solve. And this is how these inventors did it. And this is how we can come together and figure out this problem. Cade Museum is on an old former toxic EPA Superfund site. It was solved and cleaned. It's now Gainesville's premier Central Park, because we had a cast of hundreds, each bringing their unique skill set to solving that specific problem. We didn't have a vocabulary that was divisive. It was like, we are solving this problem together. And here's what I bring, and here's what you bring.
And one thing that I have found to be particularly interesting, interviewing lots of innovators and inventors now, especially through the Cade podcast, is that oftentimes we tend to think of innovation as something really large and very complicated and this eureka moment. But very often it seems like common sense to a lot of innovators, and that often is a gift. And they view it as like everyone would see it this way. But the reality is oftentimes only you see it that way. And you have to act on that. And the example of your mom is a really good one. To her, that was common sense. In reality, it really was not. It was a brilliant idea. All right, couple of questions here. We'll start with the one from Dr. Alexander. With Florida right now as the launch state, or the premier state, as she says, are there other states being considered for launching further initiatives for innovation?
You mean with the Event Possible curriculum?
Yes.
Okay, so our strategy in the next 2 years is to complete a toolkit that takes the Invent Possible curriculum with a variety of different things in the toolkit that could help any community could license and figure out how to implement this in their hometown, and activating their local inventors and scientists and engineers and artists. It really is a strategy for bringing them all together for this holistic education that's inventivity based. So yes, the question is, we have a strategy, but it will take 2 years to fill out the toolkit ready to be exported. We have the prototype that works in Gainesville. If that question from the audience.
Yes.
So I'm a high school teacher, and one of the problems is that the curriculum is so tight, they won't let us do things. I just came back from Gettysburg, and I'm gonna have a problem learning what I learned in Gettysburg because they won't give me time to do that. Now, I do see innovation in the robotics club, but are you gonna, how do you address that in the curriculum?
So this is a great question. I don't know whether if people online could hear. Could you hear well, James? Part of the making the toolkit is tying every single experience, because we have thousands of experiments now, to NGSS standards by grade level. So we've actually been very successful partnering with our local school system. We have field trips every day, even before testing. When we first started, they were like, no, not until after they finish their statewide testing in the spring can they come on a field trip. But we said, we'll help you prepare for third grade reading and all your science scores, because it's holistic and you can bring in all of these different NGSS standards with this field trip. So therefore they can justify bringing the kids for a 4-hour field trip, because they're hitting everything they were going to teach that week anyway. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Paul asked, how do you identify a potential innovator in the young? And let me add a little context to this that was not in the question. There was an article written in the Wall Street Journal about Buchholz High School here in Gainesville, Florida, and their math program, where they've won 13 of the last 14 state championships, despite the fact that the high school itself is not rated super high.
National.
National. Yes, national, correct, national. And in general, it's an idea where one person was innovative, right, and created a new curriculum and had to work with the school district to say, here's what I want to do. And anyway, I thought of it because they were able to identify, starting in elementary school, who may be good at math, and then begin to build that. So can something like that be done with innovation?
The correct answer is yes, it can be. And that's what it's, and he is now trying to figure out how to take what they did in Gainesville at Buchholz and export that across the nation. We're in a very similar, we have to quantify more and bring it into exactly what are you licensing and how do you implement it. The implementation plan is, by the way, I'm a Buchholz graduate, and I was a Buchholz cheerleader, and I can do the Buchholz cheer if you want, but I won't.
We'll save that for next episode.
Next episode.
Jamie wants to know, if you had a crystal ball, what does the future of innovation in the state of Florida look like? And then perhaps if you're successful, the nation, maybe 10 or 15 years from now.
So I think Florida is going to continue to grow in innovation. And I think it's because Florida is almost like, I haven't figured out the right sentence to explain this, but if you look at the early founding of our nation, you had immigrants coming from every country, every culture, and they were living side by side in New York City, say. And it's not a coincidence that so many inventions come out of those intersections of different cultures, because you're bringing a potential solution from a different point of view to a specific problem. So that is why, from the beginning, immigrants were always disproportionately represented in a positive way with a number of patents from the very beginning. And Florida is not a swing state for nothing. We're a swing state because we represent pretty much every single demographic across the nation in one state. So it reminds me a little bit of that energy that you had at the beginning of our nation at the founding in our state, which is much smaller. And if we can continue to connect the networks across the state, like we do with Florida Inventors Hall of Fame, that's a great example, or NASA, or if you can build in that network of different institutions across the state, that would activate it even more. But it reminds me very much of the makeup of our founding back 250 years ago.
That's a very interesting observation. And yeah, Florida in a lot of ways is like a mini America. All right, last question from Mike. If you could define one quality that generally exists in people who gravitate towards inventivity, and how organizations may be able to identify those people, what would be that quality?
I would say it's resilience and curiosity. Curiosity and resilience, and the willingness to take risk and fail. Failure is hugely important. And I just don't like how they teach in school about kids are so afraid to fail now, and they think they're a failure. And it's like, no, you have to embrace failure as part of the process, and be resilient in the face of those setbacks, and unbelievably curious. Why didn't this work? Let me figure it out. So curiosity, resilience, and excitement about failure.
Those are good. And curiosity is generally natural and innate. Resilience, definitely something that has to be fostered, taught, or learned a lot of times. And so I like that you put both of those in there. All right, that's going to be all the time that we have for today's program. I'm going to turn this over to Liz. Before I do so, thanks to all of you for enduring, 20% of my normal vocal power. And thank you, Phoebe, for, as always, enlightening us with such wonderful information.
James, it's always fun to have a conversation with you. And James does serve on our board. It's great. He's a wonderful board member.
Thank you. I'll turn it now over to Liz.
Thanks, James. It was great to have both of you and another wonderful, lively discussion. Phoebe, I don't think any of us are now going to forget about Article 1, Section 8 in the Constitution, and along with all the other references that you made to invention and innovation in the Constitution. That was incredibly interesting. And the idea about innovation and curriculum, I think, is something that our schools are really just needing so desperately. So thank you for bringing that to our communities, as well as putting it out to all of us so that hopefully we can help you get the word about inventivity inventivity, right?
Inventivity.
Yes, into our communities as well. So we're so happy you're at Florida House. We hope you all will join us again next week. Our topic next week is veterans and their influence on innovation, and particularly innovation to commercialization. DJ Schmidt and Michael Finkelstein, the founders of Neuro 20, are the ones who will be joining us next week. So until then, we hope you'll join us. Come see us soon. Thank you again, Phoebe, for being at Florida House. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.